Have any of you been getting boring of iPhone news? Have you been thinking that Apple's losing their innovation and they're not doing anything major with the iPhone lineup anymore? Well, I'm here to tell you it's about to get a whole lot worse. In fact, we've been spoiled with years prior in iPhone upgrades. We have just kind of lucked out with year over years being very, very massive, and today's video is specifically about why I think next year's iPhone, okay, not the iPhone 12, but the iPhone 12s or the 13, the iPhones coming out in 2021 are going to be some of the most boring iPhones we've seen in a long time. Pure speculation. Yes, that's right. Let's begin. Alright, here's the truth. If we go back and just look at when I've been covering videos for the past few years, my channel kind of got picked up and started with the iPhone 7, okay? And a lot of people were disappointed with the iPhone 7, but the truth is, there were a lot of year-over-year changes there despite the design looking fairly similar. We had the solid-state home button, the first iPhone with stereo speakers, that's right. We had the first iPhone with a dual camera. We had the first iPhone with water resistance. We had the A10 chip, which was a pretty big leap forward, and lots of new color options. So it was a very physically different looking iPhone, despite the displays looking the same. The overall chassis changed quite a bit. And of course, the removal of the headphone jack, which was a huge monumental shift, and there were lots of debates, a lot of people hating on it, and a lot of people admitting that this was the future, and look at where we are now. I think they ended up being right there, but there were a lot of things to talk about with the upgrade of the iPhone 7, okay? So that was a fairly substantial year. You know, screen sizes and form factor wise, not much changed, but there were a lot of internal changes to talk about, and other than the lack of wireless charging, I think it was pretty solid. But then the Galaxy S8 came out after the iPhone 7, and I think that accelerated Apple's development of the first OLED iPhone, and this, in my opinion, is the biggest iPhone upgrade of all time. It will probably never get this major in the future, and I can't think of an iPhone prior to the iPhone 10 that was this major as well. This was the first time iPhones had curved corners. It was a new aspect ratio, it was a new form factor, it had stainless steel edges, it had a new biometric, it didn't have a home button, it went all in on gesture control, and now we had glass backs with wireless charging with the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, and of course the iPhone 10 as well, dual optical image stabilization. This was the first year we had 4K at 60 video recording, we had the A11 chip, we had improved fast charging capabilities. There were so many changes brought with the iPhone 10. That's likely why it was one of the most hyped releases ever. There was so much build up to it. A lot of you probably discovered my channel leading up to the iPhone 10 launch because there was just so much to talk about. And typically when there are major super cycles like that and there's these giant refreshes, you typically get a somewhat minor year after the fact, right? That's typically when Apple takes a bit of a sleeper year, they make it an S year as we call it, and just focus on updating some of the internals, not too much on design changes. But we got lucky once again in 2018 because immediately following the iPhone 10 we got new form factors, and they brought iPhone 10 features to the rest of the iPhone lineup. So, for instance, if Apple just released the XS, okay, and they didn't release the XR or the XS Max, that would be more equivalent to what we're going to experience next year, okay? Because the 10 to the XS, it was honestly really minor. It was like A11 to A12 chip. We have a slightly better front-facing camera. We have stereo microphone recording now, and we've got a new gold color. You know, there's some slight updates here and there, but for the most part, 10 to XS, incredibly small. Anyone who had an iPhone 10 was not really rushing out to buy the XS because, again, that was such a minor of an upgrade. But there was lots else to talk about that year because the XR was pretty amazing, and that dominated the market. Everyone loved the XR. It was just the right amount of everything. Yeah, the bezels were a little thicker, and it didn't have a dual camera, but it made the amazingness of the iPhone 10 more obtainable to more people. And then, of course, XS Max, I think there was plenty to talk about too, because now Apple was doing OLED on more than just one size, and it was also the biggest display on an iPhone of all time. So we were finally getting the full-size keyboard of the 8 Plus that we liked, except now with Face ID and gesture control. In fact, if you go back and watch, I actually enjoyed switching back to the iPhone 8 Plus after I had used the iPhone 10 for a few months because I missed that giant wide screen. I didn't like having the compact form factor, and I liked having the larger keyboard, and I was actually quite comfortable with going back to the home button and everything. So I couldn't wait for the XS Max to come out because to me that was gonna be like the best of both worlds. It was like the plus size form factor, which I like, but with the Super Retina display and the Face ID and the gesture controls that I loved of the iPhone X. So obviously I was a big fan of the iPhone XS match. So 2018 ended up feeling like quite a major year, despite it technically being an S year, because we got these new form factors to talk about. 2019 was a bit more like the iPhone 7, however. This one was more about cleaning things up, improving some of the internal specs, and if anything, last year's iPhones felt more like an S year than 2018, even though they were not branded as S phones. The iPhone 11, I think, was the big shocker because no one really predicted that Apple was going to cave in on the ultra-wide camera instead of telephoto, which in the end I think was a good call because it's more noticeable when it comes to camera options and that kind of thing. But also the $50 lower starting price, along with the A13 chip being much faster, the better battery life, that really caught people out of left field, seeing Apple price something lower than before, and the fact that the iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max got huge battery improvements. They got the ultra-wide camera, they got the frosted glass on the back, which did give them kind of a fresh new look, and the removal of 3D touch, which I think allowed for those bigger batteries, gave us plenty to talk about what features are really useful versus what features are gimmicky, and what is Apple willing to ditch in the long run in favor of better overall performance. It was somewhat minor, but there was still lots and lots of things to talk about. The lower starting price was awesome, and that brings us to 2020, which in my opinion is going to be one of the more major iPhone releases in a while, because we're getting squared off edges, new form factors, OLED by default across the lineup. The A14 chip is the first 5nm chip design in a smartphone, so we should experience pretty big performance gains or even decent battery life improvements as well. And the biggest iPhone of all time is being released alongside the smallest iPhone in years. So this year, whether it has a smaller notch or 120 Hz or not, is still pretty major. This is kind of the iPhone X of the 2020s. If we look back at Apple's history, it seems like they kind of stagger releases in batches of 3 now, right? Like in 2014, we had the iPhone 6, we had the 6S, and then after the S year now, we have the camera year. That's essentially what they did afterwards with the iPhone 7, emphasizing the dual camera and portrait mode and ironing things out. It was kind of a repeat with 2017 in the iPhone X. We get the new design, we get the S year, and then we get the camera year. So essentially what that means is we're about to start the new design cycle in 2020 with the iPhone 12, but that means in 2021, it's got to be an S year, and unlike 2018, Apple's not going to be able to stretch this new design language across the 2 new form factors or make it more affordable somewhere, because this time all the new design languages in new form factors are being released simultaneously. So in 2021, we're not going to get to look forward to the iPhone 12R or something, because the iPhone 12 is already starting at pretty competitive pricing, whether it's $650 or $700. We're not going to get the iPhone XR with the next generation in 2021. So that means that in next year, the iPhones are probably going to be exact same form factors that they were this year, just with some internal component upgrades. And unlike the iPhone 7, there's a lot less incremental internal upgrades that Apple can actually do, because iPhone 7 had a bunch of stuff to catch up on, whether it was stereo speakers or water resistance or updating the home button to be solid state. There was a bunch of things that the rest of the market was doing that iPhone 7 got to catch up a little bit with. Whereas next year's iPhones, man, I mean, they could update the cameras a little bit, but they're still all going to be OLED. They're probably going to be the same form factors. We'll get the A15 chip, but that's not going to be any smaller than the 5nm, so I wouldn't expect the A15 chip to be significantly better than A14. I'm sure it'll be an improvement, but not a leap and bound better. And we have heard rumors that Apple wants to remove the charge port in 2021, which, if anything, that's not a feature. That's like a downgrade. That's like a reason for someone to not upgrade their iPhone and be like, you know what? I'll stick with the 2020 iPhone 12 another year, because I like having the port on my phone. So if that rumor ends up being true, I don't think it's going to help the sales to remove the charge port unless they do something crazy with that model. But an LTPO OLED display is very much likely in 2021. But the truth is, if 120 Hz isn't happening this year, then that means next year it's going to feel overdue. It's going to be like, finally, because every other premium flagship on the market is already going to have 120 Hz at that point. So 120 Hz coming to the iPhone in September of 2021 is just going to feel late. It's gonna be like when Apple added wireless charging to the iPhone 8. Everyone was like, finally, why didn't you do this earlier? So once 120 hertz does come around, it won't feel that major, and kind of the same thing if Apple decides to bring back Touch ID on the 2021 iPhones for the sake of a lot of people still wearing masks and optional having 2 biometrics and that kind of thing. If they put the fingerprint readers underneath the display, everyone's gonna be like, ugh, finally, why didn't they do this earlier? And they might do something with the notch, but again, we've been saying that for the past 3 years. It's like, oh, well, 2018, the notch will be smaller. Oh, well, 2019, the notch will be smaller. 2020, the notch will be smaller. Oh, actually, it's the same size notch. So I feel like the boy who cried wolf in suggesting that, well, next year the notch will be gone. But even then, guys, the notch being gone or even just getting smaller, it's not going to change the way you use your phone. You're still going to scroll and take pictures and videos the exact same way. So my point is, we're due for a really, really boring S year. The most boring iPhone upgrade since probably the iPhone 6S, in my opinion, which no one was really watching my videos back when that came out, so there's not too much content I got out of the 6S release in the first place. But my prediction is 2021, it's going to be all about the Apple Silicon Macs. That's what mostly we're going to be talking about and seeing that ARM transition take place. But when it comes to iPhones, I expect rumors and leaks and everything to get real stale, and it's going to be pretty difficult to find anything interesting about the 2021 lineup, because my guess is the notch is still going to be there, 120 hertz on the Pro end models. Maybe it'd be kind of interesting if they brought 120 hertz to the low end models, but I doubt it. So the most interesting Apple hardware is not going to be the iPhones next year. That's my prediction. Of course, in traditional Tailosive Tech fashion, I hope I'm wrong, my new slogan. But let me know what you guys think I'm missing. What big upgrades in 2021 should we expect or get excited for? Feel free to let me know. This is your App Shape here. I'll see you in the next one.